Hello and welcome to the International Science Festival, Gothenburg. I'm Marnie Chesterton from the BBC World Service, and it's going to be my pleasure to be your host through this evening's activities. Over the next few days, this city will host hundreds of activities for over 60,000 visitors, all in the name of science. I'd like to say that Gothenburg is the biggest science festival in Sweden, but I think it's currently the only science festival in Sweden, and it's so much more than that. It's currently one of the top science events in Europe. The Science Festival arranges itself into 3 programs. As well as the general one, there's a schools program, which engages with around 20,000 school pupils, and there's a professionals program that gathers science communicators, teachers, and others from all over Scandinavia. And best of all, this, the 23rd International Science Festival, is free, and as of now, open for everyone. The science events you'll have a chance to experience over the coming week range from the humanities to social sciences, medicine, physics, biology, technology, with an emphasis on our innermost selves. The theme helps focus those fields into something more cohesive, and the 2019 International Science Festival theme is Astonishing Thoughts, exploring our minds and thoughts. You see, our clever big brains are a defining feature of our species. We use them to create, to problem solve, to empathize with others, and to reflect on our place in this world. So, what happens when we use our brains to imbue machines with similar qualities? And in what ways has technology affected our own human intelligence? To explore this question, I'd like to introduce a human with impeccable record in astonishing thought. Cedric Villani is a mathematician and more recently also a politician. He's a receiver of the Fields Medal for Maths. He's a member of the Academy of Sciences. He's lectured in more than 70 countries, published several books, including the bestseller Birth of a Theorem. Cedric is fascinated by the process of thought and the place that science plays in society. In fact, he's in charge of the French strategy for artificial intelligence. I'll be quizzing him on that later, but please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you for the great introduction. Thank you for the warm welcome. It's such a pleasure to be here. Intelligence is the thing we are most proud of as human beings, for sure. And among recent technologies, none has triggered as much talks and wonderings and whatever you may imagine that is buzz as artificial intelligence, and its impact and the way it works and where it will go. However, before we all get obsessed with artificial intelligence, it's good that we still reflect on our human intelligence and on the fact that in science, many fields have been impacted by artificial intelligence, but none has been created by it. And no scientific revolution so far has been reproduced or triggered by algorithms. Let's take this as a starting point for reflection on the big ideas that made the revolutions in the sciences and the fact that they were all grounded in culture, in the way that humans like to organize their process of creativity. And here, in Sweden, I'd like to recall that for us mathematicians, one of the great symbols of taking time for new ideas is a house in the suburbs of Stockholm that used to be the house of the great mathematician Gustav Mittag-Leffler, and is often considered as the oldest international mathematics institute in the world. When you arrive in this institute, it's as if time has stopped. It was the house of Mittag-Leffler. Everything is fine and beautiful, has been thought and thought again. Mittag-Leffler was the founder of the famous mathematics journal Acta Mathematica, the one in which I published the theorem co-authored with my former student Clément Mouot that led me to the Fields Medal. Actually, that is what is told in the book that you mentioned in the introduction. And in the book, I don't focus on what is the result or its meaning, but what's the complicated, elaborate, chaotic, unexpected process full of adventures and mistakes again, and bounces again that led to the finding of the theorem. And before that, the chaotic process that led to the idea that there was a theorem to be proven in that subject. Finding the right problem is already such an important step in the scientific field. Among the many mathematicians whose work I built upon, let me quote another Swedish one. That is Torsten Carleman, one of the followers of Mittag-Leffler. Carleman was the first one to transform the physics theory of Boltzmann equation, theory of atoms, statistical theory of matter, explaining the behavior of a gas with all its molecules that are in shock within each other, transformed this physics theory into mathematical problems. It was the start of a huge field in which Swedish mathematicians, but also mathematicians all around the world, including the French school in which I belong, came and built and found new ideas, new theorems. At the very start, there was this issue. What are the interesting questions to ask and how should we formalize this? And in the founding paper by Carleman in the 30s, this was a first answer to these questions. What is the interesting problem about this? The name of Boltzmann in itself is a good symbol for revolution. Here's a man who, against the dominant opinion in his time, believed that the world was made of atoms. Tiny grain, tiny elements that were invisible to the eye. He even doubted that one could observe them ever. And developed a whole theory, thinking, taking for granted the existence of these atoms. A few years after his tragic death, atoms were accepted by the scientific community around the world. And people soon became convinced that they were not just a dream, but the reality. What is astonishing is that nobody ever saw an atom by this time. It took a long time before electronic microscopes were able to see these atoms. But around 1910 or so, people were convinced of the existence of the atoms without having seen one. How come? That's because the theory of Boltzmann was making predictions about the presence of particles where they could be found after wandering, estimates about phenomena such as Brownian motion, coming with quantitative results that were checked with such accuracy that there was no doubt. You see, when you make a prediction, a complicated prediction, and it is satisfied exactly, it cannot be a coincidence. It has to come from the truth. That is what the scientists after Boltzmann discovered. And so hard computation, tough computations came to confirm the vision of Boltzmann. You need both to make a great theory, the vision and the computations. Let's take another example of the same period, Lord Kelvin, maybe the greatest physicist of his time, and like Boltzmann, also one of the founders of thermodynamics that revolutionized both theory and practice and applications in our world. Among the many problems that Kelvin worked on, there was the age of the Earth. And Kelvin was convinced that the Earth was rather young, maybe 100 million years old, something like that. Something that led to an enormous crisis, clash between physicists and evolutionary biologists, because there was no time for the evolution of species to take place in such a young Earth that Kelvin showed. And Kelvin argued with mathematics, showing how, based upon the theory of heat by Fourier and model of cooling down of the Earth, it was impossible that the Earth be so old. And computations were very precise and confirming the idea, the computations of Kelvin. Where was the mistake? Not in the computations, not in the mathematical theory. It took a long time to understand that the mistake was in the vision. Kelvin had this idea of a solid Earth, like a ball of iron, while we know now that inside the Earth it's moving. It's like fluid with convection moves and so on. Computations were right, vision was wrong. And here we see this such an important thing. Had Kelvin have the most advanced computer programs nowadays, the best ways of computing with our supercomputers, he would have done the same mistake. It was not a problem of rigor, it was a problem of vision. And here we see where we can make a differentiation between our intelligence or the intelligence of the great pioneers whose work we revere and the kind that we are able to reproduce nowadays based on computer and algorithms. And as they say, genius is not about hitting the target in the eye. Genius is about hitting a target that nobody had seen, and the target that is the right one. And those people, Boltzmann or Kahneman, or many others that we have in mind, they found the target that nobody had seen and defined a new vision. We see the difference with the technology that we have. Nowadays, we can make computers that are much better than human beings at playing the Go. Much soon it will be computers that will be much better than human beings in finding a disease on an image coming from medical records. Much better than human beings for driving. They will be safer than the safest cars ever driven by humans. But the rules, each time, they are defined by the humans, the dreamers, the conceptors. We can have machines that reproduce the style of a musician very precisely, but so far, no machine to invent a new style, a new form, a new game, new rules. Will it come one day? Maybe. Who knows? But for the moment, let's reflect on this possibility that we have, building upon exact sciences, upon mathematics, helping us see all much beyond our intuition, on our imagination to find these new rules of the games. And let's take one last example with the human being that is most famously associated with human genius and intelligence, Albert Einstein. Among the various realizations of Einstein, there was some work on the existence of atoms, there was work on relativity, there was the work, the astounding work on the general relativity. And what Einstein did was, let's find a new geometric interpretation of gravitation. It was not about refining a theory. It was not about explaining new effect. It was about a completely new vision of how we would envision gravity. And predictions that seemed so strange that even he doubted they would be true. For instance, gravitational waves predicting in 1916, or at least he wondered whether they would exist. It took 100 years before we could observe them indeed. When a gravitational wave comes through you, it's a bit as when there is a sound wave coming, vibrating, except that what is vibrating is not something related to sound. It's the mere space-time. Distances get shorter and longer. You get shorter and longer when you are traversed by a gravitational wave. It's so tiny, 1/1000th of the diameter of a proton, something out of this world in terms of how tiny it is. The amazing thing is we can observe it through prodigy of machinery, experimental physics, theoretical physics, and through computation. And because it matched exactly the prediction, it was obtained for certain that the waves that were observed for the first time in 2016 were the result of collision of two black holes in the most amazing, silent, chaotic collision ever. Each of these black holes more heavy than 10 times the sun, and so strong that they are still vibrating, space-time still vibrating about it. By the way, Einstein himself did not believe in these black holes. You see here, in true genius vision, the vision is larger than the visionary. It has consequences and details that even the dreamer did not envision. This theory was imagined by human beings, but could never have been checked without astonishingly precise technology. Even recognizing the signature of these waves needed some heavy mathematics, signal processing, artificial intelligence also. There was no way a human being could have gone through the enormous amount of data that were gathered for this observation. But here we see the perfect share of the work in the ideas between human and the machine. The dream for the human, the machine for the verification, for the exploration, for the fine details. That is a model we have to keep in mind. Machine here has not made us, on this example, more stupid or has not taken our place. It has, on the contrary, made it possible to confirm the vision by the human. And this leads us to the idea that more than ever, in tomorrow's world, with technology to help, we will need to understand more and help the human genius, the generation of ideas, how they come to life, these ideas, which kind of documentation and knowledge, the motivation that is such a crucial ingredient and so much in need in many places in the world, but also the role of human exchanges, of human environments to help the ideas prosper, the role of constraints without which there is no creativity, the role of the intuition process and how all big ideas come from an alternance of strong concentration periods and unexpected illuminations. The role of chance also. All great ideas have this element of luck, of chance, that is woven together with perseverance. All this will be important in the future more than ever, for sure, to help the innovations, be they created either by curiosity or by need or by chance or by dream. And all this we need to develop and think with all the new technologies. How can we rest on it, use them, and still have processes of idea creations that are somehow artisanal, made with our handmade, if I may say, experience, recalling that idea creation is not just a science or an economic or a society need. It's also an art. Art is something that gathers us together, holds us together, and this art of idea creation, I believe, will be more important than ever tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you very much.
I decided to crawl out of the night, out of the dirt that pulled me down, that pulled me down, that pulled me down, that pulled me down, down. That pulled me down. You better run. 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 Better run. You better run. You better run. Better run. You better run. You better run. Better run. You better run, you better run, better run. Better run, better run, better run. there on the horizon makes the heart go. There's something out there waiting to happen, happen, happen. Deep and deeper I can go. Longing makes you feel alone. Breathing, we're born to run. Getting out is for the young. Baby, we are young. Nothing else can hurt us now. Scared out of this town. Live on until we die. Baby, we are young. Nothing else can hurt us now. Scared out of this town. Live on love until we die. Deep and deeper cut through the bones. The feeling when you're all alone. Aim higher through the scars. Look around us where we are. Baby, we are young. Nothing else can hurt us now. Let's get out of this town. Live on love until we die. Baby, we are young. Nothing else can hurt us now. Let's get out of this town. Live on love until we die. Oh, oh, baby, 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 baby.
Right. We have a smorgasbord of topics to get through in the next half hour. But last year's festival had artificial intelligence as its theme. So it feels like we're building on that this year. We're looking at artificial intelligence and technology and turning it back on us, the effect that that has on us and how we think. Cedric, can I start by asking you about creativity and technology? You seem to be saying that artificial intelligence lacks the vision that human intelligence has. Is that right?
I think it's fair to say that's the case for now. Who knows in the future? So far, every time somebody has said, you know, a machine will never be able to do this and that, at some point, wow, they did it. But so far, it's fair to say we've seen machines very strong at reproducing some behavior by humans whenever it can be quantified, at playing all kinds of games, and whenever you can put some activity in form of a game with some rules, we've seen the machine win. We've seen it very strong at recognizing patterns, at identifying things, at reproducing signals, all that is called deep learning, whatever can be seen as a powerful method to reproduce a certain behavior that is observed. But we've seen it very weak on having some common sense, having some brand new vision, finding the new game with rules that were not variations of previous rules. And we've seen how different it's been from the human intelligence.
So would you say, panel, that creativity and common sense are the things that we do much better than supercomputers?
We'll see. I think one should be very careful. As of now, yes, absolutely. I mean, when it comes to cognition, clearly the machines will excel in every possible way. The interesting question here is, well, I guess there are two questions. One is, to what extent does our creativity, that's so essential to science, to the context of discovery, as the philosopher says, how you discover things. To what extent does creativity depend on non-cognitive capacities, such as emotion, or empathy, or things that just are not cognition, or solely cognition, or even sensation? What role does sensation play? Experiences, phenomenal experiences.
When you say
for
sensation,
discovery, sensation of feeling cold and heat, and is perceiving color and the taste, all that stuff. That's sensation, right? What role does that play for discovery and creativity? We don't know the answer to that, but if that plays a large role, it's going to be much harder to build.
Can I ask the panel where they've come across artificial intelligence in their work? Louise?
Well, it kind of popped in at around like 2015, where I started to flirt a little bit with Deep Dream. That was very popular.
Because choreography and artificial intelligence, not two things I'd put together, but you have.
Well, first we had to make a proof of concept. So we had to create an AI trained on my choreographic language, my choreographic style, to see if it would be able to duplicate, or at least some kind of sense of the same thing. And so that was a training process. So that was pretty straight science forward. Me giving a lot of data into the system, and then after it being trained, first for 10 minutes, where it's just a lot of lines on the floor in spasms. After 6 hours, more like a figure, but still Bambi on thin ice, not really knowing where to go. And then after 48 hours, more convincing dancer, basically, within my style. Yeah.
More convincing. Is it better dancer than you yet?
We've discussed it. It's always in the eye of the audience, of course, in interpreting what you find attractive, but still debating on it.
But would you say that the AI component is creative?
Well, in some sense, within my limitations, I give the data, I give the limitations. It's creative within what I decided to be creative. I give the frame. So that is still the limitation, so to speak.
So what have you got out of working with AI that you wouldn't have got otherwise?
I'm actually moving from this very specific level. Usually I go into the studio working with the dancers. I either give them steps, I give them assignments where they give me some feedback. Here I get, from the AI choreography system, I get phrases back within my choreographic body language and style. A bit narcissistic, actually. Kind of playing around with you.
Hey, you made the data set. You can do what you want, right?
Exactly. So that's what I'm really into right now. But anywho, so it's been like a dialogue, a partnership back and forth, both trying to do the choreography to see, does it actually work within the body, or is it just floating in midair, or is there something in it?
But is it teaching you new moves?
It is, because of course the order of things is a bit different, and also it challenges me in my movement pattern. But most specifically, for right now, for what's interesting for me, now we have the proof of concept, we're working with it, it's all about data. What is interesting for me is to go beyond that. What can I apply it on? Can I take choreography out of the body and put it on something else?
So dance without the human.
Yes.
What
maybe a balloon. What would happen if I put it onto an object, or a sound, or light, or smell, or the ideas are endless. The solution, not so sure what it is yet, but.
But then, of course, because it's artistic, it has to be successful. It just needs to be something that you go, yeah, I wouldn't have. Yeah, that's cool. Whereas, presumably, if you're using AI to help you with maths, it's either right or it's not.
Wow. Sometimes you can formulate it in this way, but precisely one of the big issues in AI nowadays is to make the distinction between the machine giving you its gut feelings, let's say, based on statistics, based on randomness, etc., or some result that you can check and know that it's true. Or sometimes it's a solution that is provided by the machine by whatever means, and you can check a posteriori. But there is all these things. To understand the dilemma, you have to know just a bit about the principles of AI, because there's been an enormous shift in the past decades about the core principles of AI. In the old days, when the reflection about AI started, 1956 is the first occurrence of the word, many people thought it had to do a lot with logic, with reproduction in the programs of the human, let's say, logic and reasoning process. And it was about rules. Things such as expert systems were part of these trends. And when it gives you some result, you understand why it gives a result. There's a way to explain. And on the other hand, the AI that emerged dominant in the past decades and even more in the past few years is based on quite the opposite. Not asking about the reasons, but about the effects. Taking a bunch of examples and going through the examples and trying to reproduce them. A little bit as the difference between trying to speak a language by knowing the grammar rules or trying to speak a language just by hearing how people talk and speak it without knowing any rule. And in the second case, you are unable to explain. You say, I think that's the right way to say it, but you cannot say this is because of this and that rule. The dominant AI currently is based on examples and statistics, and so it's a big challenge to go back to explanations and verification. It's a whole thing called verifiable AI, transparent AI, etc. Certifiable AI with the idea that you can understand the cause for the answer by the machine.
Is it still, though, a tool to you?
I personally, as a mathematician, never used AI. Let's be clear about it. I went into AI, first because it is currently the subject that is at the intersection of science and politics, let's say the hottest, the one in which there is the most uncertainty, need for experimentation, need for rearranging the ways that our campus, our universities are organized and so on, need to rearrange the contact between the scientists and the industry, for instance, and in which, you know, every country is wondering how many billions can we make on this and that, or here it's how many hundreds of millions, which is enormous compared with the size of the Swedish economy. And so it's a super hot topic at the intersection of science and politics. That's why I went into it. Another reason I went into it is that some of the techniques that I developed as a researcher and that I worked on as a researcher have also been used by experts in AI. You know, it's a field that is very much moving. AI uses techniques coming from a lot of fields. But in my experience of mathematician, I will tell you what has been most important for me based on AI, that is automatic translation, to translate papers from one language to another. That, my friends, is AI. We are used with it, it works. There's a famous saying by a pioneer of artificial intelligence saying, I think it's Minsky, when it works, you stop calling it AI, you know?
Yep, you just shift the goalposts.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's not really intelligence. It's just...
That's exactly the case. But automatic translating is one of these techniques. And in the context of Europe, the most fascinating one, because Europe is this crazy, so important political construction that we're making to transform into reality decade after decade, based also on this strong variation of languages from country to country, and it could be one of the moonshots that there would be for Europe. Develop system of automatic simultaneous translation, say in speech, from any language in Europe to any other language, and that would be a way to make technological reality of that famous quote that the language of Europe is translation.
Douglas Adams invented a fictional Babel fish that you put in your ear and it does
that is
the simultaneous translation for you.
The galactic hitchhiker.
Yep, that's the one. If we are going to use artificial intelligence and technology integrated into how we think in a level that we haven't in previous generations, I'm wondering what the implications are for how we learn differently. So I don't know about you, but I didn't have the internet as a teenager. I had books and I had to go to a library. And so you had these geographical spaces where the knowledge was based there. So I mean, yes, how do you think things are going to change and what we're going to teach? How do you think what we're going to teach changes?
Well, that is changing already. There's in Sweden now a lot of move towards digitalization, which is a bit of an experiment because we don't really know how this will change us and our learning and our cognition. We do know that people read shorter and shorter texts, that you spend very little time on each thing you read on the web, and that is a potential issue because reading long texts, thick books like you were doing, does enhance cognition in certain ways that reading these little snippets doesn't. And cognition, I mean analytical capacities are strengthened by reading longer texts. So we shall see. I think it's a bit of an experiment and I would tread very, very carefully here. I think there's lots of incredibly interactive learning AI technology that one can use. But I think I wouldn't throw out the books anytime soon.
As AI incorporates itself or is incorporated into more and more aspects of our lives, I just want to touch on how we regulate it. And AI, if it's an algorithm, is only as good as the biases of the person that has created that. Has anyone on the panel got a comment on that?
Well, it's going to be our big next challenge, I think. I mean, we need to regulate all sorts of things, the role of robots in war, in workplace, and all of that. We also need to regulate social media. That's a very big challenge. And how that's going to be done without impeding on freedom of speech and so on. It's really a very big challenge. So I think we are standing in the face of very new and big legal challenges.
There's limitations of the bias of the team who produce the algorithm, but also in most cases biases of the data sets that has been used to calibrate the algorithm. There's a tendency to reproduce in the algorithm the human biases. That is a very perverse problem. There is also the problems that may arise from mistake in the chain of production of the product. Now, it's no coincidence that the USA was at the same time the country in which most experiments were led and in which the most alarmist alarms, let's say, were written and were shouted. The reference book for all people who are, let's say, who want to know what are the real dangers of AI, not the sci-fi, not the fantasies, but the real problems that may arise, is the book by American former quant and mathematician Cathy O'Neil, Weapons of Math Like Mathematical Destruction. And in there, she goes chapter after chapter. Let's analyze what can go wrong with examples from judiciary system, or from administration, or from manipulation, advertisement, etc., etc. Now that we've seen these examples, it's our duty to regulate. But then we have to be careful. Europe is a continent of regulation, and a continent that is also very much afraid with this. We are already the most protected continent, but still the most anxious and the most afraid of it. If we over and over regulate, the effect that will be that we will be just impossible to develop the products. And over the past couple of years, we've seen the Association of Ethics in France change their speech. Like a couple of years, it was like, let's be very careful and we need to put the regulation. Now it's okay. It's important to protect, but if we put so much protection that nothing can be done, then the products are not developed and we are missing something, it's not good.
And is that's an artificial intelligence problem, but is that something that, can you use AI to police AI?
Maybe. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say.
Because it sounds like hard work.
to some
that
extent.
is hard work. I mean, they know they can track disinformation computationally. So that might be tools that you can use, but you can never exclusively use that because you need to determine what's true and false at some point when you program these things. So.
I mean, I'd say it sounds like a minefield, but that sounds like quite a negative metaphor to look at the future. And I mean, so many of these technological tools that we have help us to achieve so much more than people 100 years ago could. So I'm just wondering, has technology made you think of yourself differently, Louise?
Well, yeah, I would say so, most definitely. It's been a great experience, and I'm really curious to find out more. And I think it's very important to have this curiosity. I think it's very important also to be a bit, going into your work with curiosity, but also thoroughness, and that you think about all aspects, like what kind of data am I putting into this work? What is it? What is the limitations, and what are the broadness of it?
But can I ask how if you co-create something with an AI, would you credit it, or do you see it more like the oven in which you make the cake and you're the chef?
It depends. Well, I would say both, actually, because, of course, it's more like a little bit of a dance partner, actually. I'm having conversations back and forth, and also at the end, I'm taking it to the next level. So, yeah, co-creator maybe.
Also, can I ask, are we in a revolution in intelligence with AI, or is it just showing us blind spots in our thinking?
Well, I mean, obviously it's a revolution of intelligence in some way. I mean, artificial intelligence is exploding and it's going to keep going, and it's going to change how we think about our own intelligence, obviously. I don't think that it has fundamentally changed our minds yet in that sense.
But Cedric was talking about, you said every time that there's a kind of a genius and a paradigm shift forward, that's always the human, it's not... So I'm just wondering, is the next one going to be...
Well, it's possible, right? I mean, that's the one thing people talk about. What happens when we make machines that are so intelligent that we don't quite understand what they're up to, right? That's the fear. At which point, because so far all the technology has we've been the masters of the technology in a sense, we can predict what they will do. What happens when you get a situation where you get machines that are so smart that we can no longer predict what they will do, and they can themselves make machines and so on, and you reach this point where it's beyond our control? That's one of these greatest fears around, one of them around artificial intelligence. And of course we could get there, and there are people now who are quite worried about this, and there are institutes where they work against us going that way and so on. But it could happen unless we think this through carefully, and we won't be the masters anymore, and that's very scary, of course.
I believe
go on.
That's a possibility, but before we get to that point, we have many other dangers to fight.
Like I said,
that are much more urgent.
Very possibly. And we need to think about this issue that you raised before. What values, as it were, do we put into these machines? That's a very important question.
It's interesting. I feel like this is an ongoing theme, and next year's festival theme, TBC, is going to be the next stage in this discussion, maybe. As a final point, we want to dare the audience to think beyond their current framework. So a question for the panel: how would you encourage them to do this?
Beyond the current. One needs to learn something new. And that's always how you get new ideas and realize that there are questions out there. And what better opportunity than to do that here at the Science Festival? Something that's not really in your field or in your daily life. Look at it and look at the sort of questions that are being asked there. That's how you think of new things. You learn new things.
I would say also moving out of your comfort zone, yeah, definitely. But also be open and curious, first of all, because we can bury ourselves in fear, human-made fear actually, but I also think we need to go beyond and leap into that curiosity to see where it leads us.
There is curiosity and there is the power of chance, that is chance encounters, chance situations. And sometimes you see this train is coming and you say, okay, let's try and get on it. As a scientist, it happened to me several times that it was the right thing to do, but nobody could predict for sure. The Fields Medal was obtained for a problem that was somehow out of my comfort zone. I was an expert in gas, and now it was about plasma, with reasoning and equations being different. In the book that you mentioned, I tell how much it is at the beginning real frightening, the difference in this. But I would say even more frightening and out of comfort zone was the political experience that I am in now for the past 2 years, and it really was not intended or scheduled. Actually, just a few months, because I ran for just a couple of months before I applied for being elected in Parliament, I had refused the offer by the movement to go for it. You know what happened? There was a fake news saying that I was running for election. So I read this in the newspaper, Cédric Villani is running for election.
So it must be true, right?
So it must be true. I thought, wow, I'm not going to make anyway a denial, because it can be the start of very bad reputation for the movement and so on. People started to congratulate me. Oh, I saw your courageous commitment. Go, 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 we support you.
Oh my lord, this is...
So let's go for it.
Yeah.
It was not easy, gosh, you have to, when you're not from there, going through election and campaign is something that is completely out of your comfort zone. You were a scientist, everybody loved you and trusted that you are working for the common good. Now you're in politics. Everybody has their say about what you are doing and why it's wrong and why you have become a bad person, etc. But you have to do it, and going out of this comfort zone was a changing experiment. It really taught me extraordinary number of things.
That is my favourite fake news story, and a good one to end on. So thank you to Cédric Villani, Åsa Wikfors, and Louise Krinkovic-Fries. Thank you so much.
In my whole heart, stretching out for love, I breathe here. Sun is touching my eyes. Tell me what it's like, bouncing off the clouds. You like the waves collapsing into my eyes. We are human, like an eagle circling to below. We are human, we are human. I hear your broken song echo through the storm. Ow, ow, oh, oh, oh. Ow, ow, oh, oh, ow, ow, oh, oh, oh. Ow, ow, oh, oh, oh. I hear the roar from your lion heart. Keep locked away. so it tears you apart. Mind to what? To be kept alive. Shout until the night makes fall in love. Crashing through the ice of you. Fall into the blue. We are human. We are human. Like an eagle circling to belong. We are human. We are human. I hear your broken song echo through the storm. Ow, ow, oh, oh, oh. 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 If you have a heart waiting to be loved, don't fight it, oh, don't fight it, oh. If you have a heart waiting to be loved, don't fight it, oh, don't fight it,